Penn State versus Ohio State. This is what we've all been waiting for. Number 1 versus number 2. Can the Buckeyes actually do the unthinkable and take down the dynasty?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And that is right. You are locked on to Penn State Wrestling. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day, your daily source for all things Penn State sports. My name is Seyko, and I'm your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State Wrestling and Penn State Football. And help me welcome back the expert himself when it comes to all things wrestling, Nic Kosko, contributor over at On3, has his own wrestling show where he dives deep into all these things, and we're going to be discussing Penn State, Ohio State in full here, key matchups, everything you need to know about this dual meet. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. We define the moment, putting in the work. Now that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Mazda, moving the game forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Hey, friendly reminder to let us know your thoughts down in the comments section, predictions, questions, anything that you want to talk about when it comes to this dual meet. And Nick, this, from my perspective, because of the recent injuries, particularly to Ohio State, I don't know that this is the same caliber of dual meet that we were initially anticipating. Nic Bouzakis gets dinged up against Iowa. Brandon Cannon, we're anticipating that he's not going to be in the lineup for this dual meet as well. So it takes away from it overall, but Ohio State should still make this the most interesting match that Penn State's had at any point in this season.
Yeah, pretty much. And Zach, thanks for having me back on. Yeah, I mean, what was the closest match that Penn State wrestled this year? What was the 26-12 dual meet result against Nebraska, and that was that was at home too. So, you look at all the shutouts that Penn State's had this year. I know they beat Iowa 32-3. Michigan, they also dominated. What was that? Just a few days ago. Now at this point, it feels like forever ago. Or just you almost forget about it because it's like, oh yeah, it's just business as usual for Penn State this year with the way their team lines up. Yeah, it does stink that Ohio State, without even if Bouzakis wrestles, I would think if he wrestles at 125, and I think we're anticipating that, then you have to assume, all right, there's a good chance that he could knock off the number one kid in the country, Luke Lilledahl. But it does stink that Brandon Cannon is most likely not going to wrestle again this weekend, considering the injury he suffered a couple of weeks ago. He's probably just going to only end up coming back for the postseason. He's number one in the country at 157. He's wrestled really, really well. But you would love to see that matchup with him and P.J. Duke, because then if you get P.J. Duke against Ohio State's backup, whoever it's going to be, whoever Tom Ryan decides to throw out there, I think they've used, as of late, Landon DeSalle. If I hopefully get his name right, he's been out there a couple of times, but like Duke is the overwhelming favorite there. So
yes,
that's where you're like, oh man, if only Bouzakis was fully healthy. I mean, no one's fully healthy, but the biggest thing is right in the middle, right there, is Brandon Cannon, because if you're Ohio State, as we'll dive into, your most realistic path to actually knocking off Penn State as they try to, fast approach 90 straight dual wins in a couple meets. So when you look at what Ohio State would have to do, it's win those first three. You get Cannon to get a win at 157, and then your favorite at heavyweight with Nick Feldman over Mirasola. So when you look at those matchups, you hope for a 5-5 split, the best you could possibly do against Penn State based on the matchups, and then hopefully bonus points go your way. So you're not going to quite get that, but I'm not going to rule out that Ohio State can't make this one very intriguing, especially even without Cannon at 57. If Ohio State does, in fact, win those first three matches, I think you'll see Penn State having to rally a little bit because, again, if you're Ohio State, you win the first three, who's to say that at 149, Ethan Stiles can't beat Shane Van Ness? Now, I'm not going to necessarily pick that, but who's to say that Shane Van Ness can't get picked off right there?
No, and that's the formula, right? Is Ohio State would like to have the momentum sweeping those first three. That's the idea here. So if we're talking generally, and then we'll break down the matchups, of course, one by one. Mm-hmm. But you go at lightweight, okay, Nic Bouzakis, regardless of how healthy he's going to be, the number 2 wrestler in the country, that's a 50-50 toss-up against the number 1 wrestler in Luke Lilledahl, okay, one way or another. 133, Ben Davino, Marcus Blaze. Who are we going to take, right? It's another coin toss. And then 141, that is where Jesse Mendez is supposed to separate, whether that's Nate Desmond, whether that's Braden Davis, which we will talk about, of course, but Mendez it is going to be the favorite. It's can Penn State kind of minimize that and turn it into a decision loss as opposed to a major decision or anything worse than that, right? You want to avoid bonus points in that situation. That's the formula, though, for Ohio State, trying to take those first three and then hopefully win one you're not supposed to. Ethan Stiles against Shane Van Ness. PJ Duke and hypothetically Brandon Cannon at his healthiest would be a true coin flip. But you don't have that one anymore. That's at least in your favor if you're Ohio State. And then at 165, okay, you're not beating Mitchell Messenbrink most likely. Levi, Haines, and Carson Kharchla. I guess that's one in theory you could steal. But this Ohio State team, they're stacked at the lightweights, but then Penn State's stacked in the middle and the upper weights. So it's You're going to see kind of the ebbs and flows of how quickly this tournament, this dual meet is going to swing back and forth.
Yeah, and that's not the same. You mentioned Ohio State's best core of the lineup is probably at their lightweights from 25 to 41. Arguably the best 1-2-3 punch in college wrestling, depending upon how you want to weigh that out. But Penn State, not too shabby themselves, of course, when you have Luke Lilledahl and Marcus Blaze back to back, a freshman and I beg your pardon, a second-year guy and a true freshman right there. And then obviously you throw in a Braden Davis, a former Big Ten champion in his own right, or Nate Desmond, another star freshman. So it's like these lightweights are here to stay. And could I, not that I don't think anybody's going to be Jesse Mendez, but would it absolutely stun me to see Mendez take one of those rare lumps before he goes on another national title run against a guy like Nate Desmond who kind of comes out of nowhere? No, it wouldn't stun me. I don't think it's going to happen, but it just goes to show you how much Penn State is just beyond everybody else. This is why they've won 84 straight dual meets, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. Now, a fully healthy Ohio State team could certainly put a scare into them this coming Friday. Now, I think they still can at wrestling at their best, even without Brandon Cannon in the middle. They could still put a scare into Penn State, and this is why you have to wrestle these matches. Now, in the grand scheme of things, unfortunately, even as a dual meet guy myself, this is not going to mean much. If Ohio State does break this streak, it's going to be a great moment for college wrestling. Penn State won't be able to get to, the elusive number of 90 or 100 straight dual meet victories, which I think is going to be easily attainable for them over the next year plus. But it'll be a great moment on Friday night, especially on the road at the Bryce Jordan Center. But what's it going to mean in March? Because those same Penn State wrestlers, as we always see under Cael Sanderson, generally peak at the Big Ten tournament, and especially at NCAAs when you're like, okay, here are the national title contenders, here are the All-American contenders, and all of a sudden one of those All-American contenders becomes a national title contender overnight from day one to day two of the NCAA tournament. So I'm looking forward to the dual meet for sure, considering I'm not on the air on Friday night, which is kind of nice just to sit down and actually watch this one.
Enjoy it, yeah.
Yeah, so I will actually enjoy number one versus number two. We've already had our quote-unquote duel of the century with Penn State and Ohio State. You go back to Anthony Cassar's 197-pound days a handful of years ago. That feels like forever ago, but Penn State's owned these matchups when it's like, okay, is Iowa finally the team? Can Michigan, remember when Michigan won the Big Ten tournament a handful of years ago? It's like, oh my goodness, like is this finally the year where Penn State's knocked off the throne? And they were recently. Let's not forget in the grand scheme of things. Talking from a general perspective, back in 2021. Iowa, they were the national champions. Now, granted, no Ivy League teams that year because of the COVID-shortened season. Everything was kind of a bit of a mess, but Iowa did win the national title, and then since then, Penn State's basically reloaded, and they haven't looked back since. So, can Ohio State do this in tournament time? Maybe they can. I don't think so, just by the way Penn State's wrestling this year, because I think at a certain point, the dual meet success can also translate to tournament success. Now, most people would say, well, that's a better dual meet team or that's a better tournament team. I think Penn State is one of the few examples in college wrestling where if they can get up for these big moments here, especially with these young guys wrestling the other top guys in the country, you're going to see probably the same amount of success based on the way they train under Cael Sanderson, who they're wrestling in the room, and the domino effect that Penn State's had for years where they're always getting the best looks in the country, if not the world, going into these postseason tournaments. So it's going to be a great duel, even without Brandon Cannon. I think we'll see a lot of close matches. I guess the casual fan just has to, if there is such a thing as a casual wrestling fan, maybe just has to worry about, okay, we could see a lot of close matches, especially against the, between the guys that we already have mentioned, but how many of those end up going Penn State's way anyway, where instead of a 6-4 split, 5-5 split in a best case scenario, this ends up being what? An 8-2 split for Penn State. It looks like a blowout again, despite close results.
And it's all going to go down this Friday. Now we get the opportunity to break down each individual matchups. We're going to go through the high-profile ones, starting with, we're going to assume Nic Bouzakis is in the lineup and that he's going to give his best effort against Luke Lilledahl, despite him picking up what seemed to be an injury from the Iowa dual meet. We'll start at 125. We'll work our way up to heavyweight. That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take a job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed sponsored jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping that the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria. No matter what you're searching for, specific skills, certifications, location, it saves you time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches, and now you're finding candidates that actually fit your job posting. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The Winter Games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. That's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle in the sports you care most about, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that will start slow and then somehow get intense very fast. Speed skating races decided by a matter of inches. Hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even niche events become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. That is FanDuel. Play your game. We begin at lightweight, 125. We'll work our way up progressively over the next two segments here and focus in on these matchups that 1 versus 2, top 5 matchups, right? Because Blaze and Ben Davino aren't exactly one, but still matchups that we basically get a preview of through for the Big Ten tournament and for NCAAs as well. I think we'll see a lot of these rematches over the course of March, starting with 125. Lilledahl versus Bouzakis. I'm the Penn State guy. I watched Luke Lilledahl wrestle a ton, and then, of course, him going through the freestyle circuit as well. I've just seen him get so much better and be more than just a guy that wins on his feet. Mat wrestling is so much better. He's a lot faster. He's kind of reached that new gear, and that's the natural progression, right? That's why he wanted to go to Penn State, to basically take skills that he was already good to great at and make them elite. So I've seen him take a step forward in almost every notable category, and especially with that mat wrestling. But it's also, look, he's going to win a lot of matches on his feet. He's just able to score. I think freestyle is better than his folk style just overall. And it's what he'll get 3 or 4 takedowns in the first period. Now, that's not going to be able to happen against Nic Bouzakis. You're going to see this be a lot more intense, a lot more strategic here. What Luke needs to avoid is getting into extensive mat wrestling with Bouzakis, because we all know that Bouzakis wants to try to flip you and pin you and reverse you, because that plays to his strength.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Bouzakis is arguably the strongest 25-pounder in the country right now. These guys are 1 and 2 for a reason. They're both undefeated for a reason, where they combined 20, or at least going into last week, they're a combined 25-0. So without looking at the numbers right in front of me, obviously that has not changed. They are both still undefeated. You look at the common matchups between these two. Lilledahl's lost to a guy like a Brendan McCrone. Now granted,
1 year ago at this point, yeah,
right. And then now granted, Bouzakis lost to him what was that, back in November, they're teammates. So it's not as surprising. It's kind of like how Luke Lilledahl lost to Nate Desmond before Nate Desmond went up 2 weight classes. So that one kind of cancels out in terms of, a loss for Bouzakis. But it should be noted that, McCrone did beat Lilledahl by fall last year. Now, is that really
in that exact same situation that I described?
Right. And that's what Bouzakis likes to thrive on. He likes to thrive on that chaos. Now, a guy like Lilledahl lost to Dean Peterson last year when Peterson was at Rutgers, and then he goes on a run last year anyway, and Peterson lost by fall to Bouzakis. But again, Bouzakis is more of a pinner than Lilledahl. Lilledahl has jumped levels since last year because that loss last year maybe lit a fire under him. And again, he was a freshman last year. What we've seen out of him this year, as you mentioned, the attacks on the feet are there. Bouzakis probably a little bit better on the mat in terms of looking for turns, not staying on bottom too long. He's got to be stronger just by looking at them, without actually getting a feel for those two guys in person. Now, granted, I'm about 80 pounds heavier than the two of them, so I don't think I'm going to necessarily get the right feel. And I was not a Division I wrestler, so that's entirely different, of course. But I guess the rankings are just going to end up favoring Lilledahl. This one just really goes either way. This, to me, is probably the match where Ohio State is more, again, they're looking at the first 3 like, all right, we need to win the first 3 to set ourselves up for a shot, especially if the duel starts at 125, which I would expect this is going to start at 125. It won't be a random draw. But if Ohio State has any shot of knocking off Penn State, they have to win the first 3 at minimum and then see where that momentum can take them. I think they actually like their chances more with Bouzakis over Lilledahl than at 133, which we'll dive into in a second. So I would actually, right now, I know it's at the Bryce Jordan Center. Lilledahl's going to have some extra juice. The fans are going to be rocking. He already got over the freshman hump a little bit for Lilledahl did, so he's looking like a national title contender again. But I think I would slightly, ever so slightly, lean towards Bouzakis right now, as long as, as far as what I'm reading, the weight cut is maybe a bit of a struggle for him to get down to 25 this year.
Yes.
It obviously hasn't affected him in terms of wins and losses right now, but those are that's the speculation you hear about Bouzakis going down to 25 and really just hammering home to be able to just make 25. But that's why he's so strong. The guy was a 33-pounder last year, very productive 33-pounder in the past. So, but I would ever so slightly lean towards Bouzakis here.
33, though, is interesting because I frame it the same way. Ben Davino's looked phenomenal. And again, I'm not one to pick against Marcus Blaze because he's one of the toughest to score on pound for pound in the nation. His defense is elite. But, I mean, Davino just kind of continues to check off every single box of he isn't a late bloomer. I thought he was going to be someone that might peak in March. Right out of the gate, he hit the ground running and was there to stay in the top 5. It's just Lucas Bird's in the way, or else Davino would be number 1.
Yeah, Davino looks absolutely absurd right now. 20-0 on the season. He was 18. Excuse me, he was 18-1 last year in red shirt. I forget who he lost to. I actually had to look at it real quick. Funny enough, he lost to Rutgers Dylan Shawver in tiebreakers. So the one time Davino actually lost a match, he had to take it the complete distance. It was free wrestling. That was last year, and he was unattached last year. That was at Midland. So that's how good Davino has been, and he's like now really solidified at this weight. Now, all that being said, considering I just said I would like Bouzakis more over Lilledahl, I'm only saying this because I think Marcus Blaze is. I can't say a shoe-in to win the title, but I would put more money, or I would put money on Marcus Blaze to have a better shot to win the NCAA title this year than Ben Davino. I've seen Marcus Blaze in person, up close and personal. Now, granted, I know it was against Drexel. It wasn't against one of these top 3 guys in the country, that's no disrespect to Drexel, obviously. But Blaze wasn't wrestling a guy like Lucas Bird or Davino or Frost in front of me. But I saw this kid back in December, and I'm like, well, he's coming off a run at the Olympic trials as a high schooler. He was a much-hyped prospect like P.J. Duke, his teammate, who we'll talk about in a second. And I'm like, the way he wrestles, his stance, his motion, his technique, his ferocity just to keep moving forward. Marcus Blaze, to me, is one of the most impressive pound-for-pound wrestlers I've seen so far this season. And I would lean towards Marcus Blaze winning this match over Ben Davino. Now, granted, because Davino's been so darn good, and this is his second year of college wrestling, he's got more mat time underneath his belt at this level. That's not to say Marcus Blaze can't catch up rather quickly, but I would say Blaze is my personal favorite over Davino in this match. I don't think either one is going to set the world on fire in terms of we're going to see bonus points as unless there's a a fluke pin in this match. But I could see Bouzakis getting Ohio State off to the right on the right foot at 125. But Blaze, I don't know. I just have a funny feeling where this could be a situation where maybe you see a Marcus Blaze and Lucas Bird Big Ten final. Maybe you see a Blaze Davino rematch at the Big Ten semis, but Blaze has his number at a certain point, right? And then that's where Blaze, is really on the map. Whether he loses by a point to Lucas Bird or he knocks off Lucas Bird, then all of a sudden it's all Marcus Blaze in the NCAA tournament in Cleveland next month. So I think this will start the train of okay, it's time. Not that people weren't doing this already, but now's the time to say Marcus Blaze is going to be the guy to beat in Cleveland next month if he wins this match, and I think he will.
We still haven't talked, at the time of this recording, we haven't talked to Cael yet. So Nate Desmond versus Braden Davis, that's kind of the bigger matchup between Mendez and whomever he faces, right? Because Desmond is really starting to come into his own. Penn State fans, I think, like myself, are kind of torn. Okay, well, Davis has won a Big Ten tournament. He placed 5th at NCAAs. He was supposed to go through the redshirt season, but Desmond, as a true freshman, upsets Luke Lilledahl, right? Upsets him in a match that hypothetically doesn't count here. So, but we all saw it, right? And then just continues to get better and get better. And Dylan Ragusin, look, if it wasn't for the injuries, he'd be easily a top 10, top 5 wrestler if he hadn't gone through the severity of those leg injuries. So
yeah,
Nate Desmond, I know he hasn't been wrestling at 41, and I'm kind of leaning towards we're going to see Braden Davis just because the weight better suits him at this point in time. So Mendez, give us the perspective of Mendez and what you're anticipating from him regardless of the opponent, and then who do you think ultimately Penn State's going to trot out there? Because Desmond actually doesn't burn his red shirt if he wrestles against Ohio State.
Yeah, I was actually just going to dive into that too. But from the Mendez perspective, he's just so darn good. I mean, he's the most
Hodge Trophy contender.
Right. Yeah, I think he's the most dominant guy right now. I'd have to look at the actual numbers in terms of bonus, who has the bonus point percentage, who has the most pins, tech falls, whatever, what have you. But I mean, he's 17-0 this year. He's won 2 national titles in a row. He's going for number 3. I'd be stunned if he doesn't get it at this point. He's over 88% in terms of his bonus rate. Actually, I don't even know who he beat close, and I'm trying to look at it right now. Echemendia, he beat 5-1 in their duel back in December. What else we have on here? Mendez also beat Brock Hardy 4-1.
That's number 3 and 4 guys in the nation.
Right. That was those are two of the top guys in the country. And that match against Brock Hardy, again, a Big Ten match. Who we could very well see that again in Big Tens. He beat him 4-1 at the national duels, but in their duel a couple of weeks ago, he beat him 14-3. So you just see the level in terms of Mendez jumping in real time. But those are his only 2 close matches this year. And realistically, are they really even close? He had 1 point in each match. He's the one who had the takedown plus. You know what I mean? So he's on a different planet right now, I think, compared to the rest of the weight class. Bonus points are going to be a factor here where you could see, I don't know, a 7-3 match or a 7-2 match at a certain point. And then Mendez is like, I need another takedown or 2 to really lock up a major decision, if not a tech fall, and he's going to go get it. So I think whoever goes out there for Penn State, they're definitely going to be the underdog. And as you mentioned before, Desmond would not burn his red shirt if he wrestles in this one. So if you're Cael and you still want to be careful with Braden Davis, if that hand injury is a little bit, if it's lingering at all, and you want to keep Davis good and ready for the rest of the dual meet season and then leading into Big Tens, why not throw Desmond out there and see what he can do? Because we've seen crazier things happen. Not saying he's going to beat Jesse Mendez, but I actually wouldn't mind seeing Nate Desmond go up against Mendez, even if he is the I hate to call him this, but even if he is a sacrificial lamb to the 2-time champ.
We know what we've seen with Braden Davis, right? We know that he's good. We know that he's capable, but has he reached his ceiling? I'm still eager. What can we learn more about Nate Desmond? So I would prefer to see Desmond just for the sake of the moment. Okay, how close are you to a Jesse Mendez, right? It's not going to get any better than this here at 141. So where are you in that pecking order at 141 if you were the guy at NCAA? So Desmond is my choice to wrestle out there. And then if there's a clear gap, okay, kind of resettle in. And I imagine Desmond and Davis are going to go for a wrestle out. That is a conversation for later. Hey, we got more in this conversation We got to also talk about the other potential championship caliber matchups, Kharchla and Haines, right? 84, Rocco Welsh, a revenge opportunity against his former team. That is all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Dawn Staley and South Carolina remain on top of the SEC standings after handing Tennessee their worst defeat in program history with a final score of 93-40. In the 43-point win, South Carolina shot 69% from the field. Tessa Johnson had a perfect shooting night, scoring 24 points, shooting 4 for 4 from the floor, including 2 threes, and made all 4 of her free throws. And UCLA remains undefeated in Big Ten play, topping Michigan 69-66 as Player of the Year contender Lauren Betts put up a double-double, scoring 16 points, collecting 16 rebounds, and adding 5 assists and 3 blocks. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Ethan Stiles versus Shane Van Ness. I mean, this is a good one because Van Ness gets, this is a rematch from NCAA's a year ago. Mm-hmm. Van Ness, I've just been overall impressed with kind of the same thing, how he's just taken steps forward. Okay, every category, kind of the same argument that I've made for Luke Lilledahl is that he's gotten better at all of his strengths. All of his strengths have been strengthened here. And Stiles, who is a All-America contender, but is he close enough to that tier of title contender? And I don't know that I see it yet with Stiles, but Van Ness, he pinned him last year in NCAAs. Yeah. I feel like this is one that's still going to be favorable, but one that Ohio State probably feels confident enough that, hey, we could surprise here and maybe steal one from Penn State if the dual meet were going to go, again, in their favor.
Yeah, I would make the argument that Stiles is definitely, he's jumped to level 2 since coming over from Oregon State last year. Now, he didn't have a great end to that NCAA tournament. He got onto the podium, but then ran to Van Ness, pinned him in a little over a minute, and then he lost to, I believe it was Lachlan McNeil, if memory serves correct, in that 5th, 6th match. So, again, Stiles, really, really good. And I wanted to confirm, make sure that I had that right. And funny enough, McNeil, what was at North Carolina last year, now at Michigan. So all these guys could see each other again anyway in the Big Ten tournament. So Van Ness, as you said, Zach, he's always. It's weird because I feel like he always gets better, right? He's wrestling his best right now. His bonus rate's over 80%. We've seen some lulls when he's only when he's healthy, and obviously he's battled injuries throughout his college career. He had a red shirt. I know he took the medical red shirt a couple of years ago, but the 2 seasons that he's completed in full, he's finished 3rd on the podium. Now, again, this year it seems like it's national title or bust. I'm not going to say he's a bust if he doesn't win a national title.
It's his weight class to lose.
Right, right. I think this year it's his to lose. I know people are probably hanging on the fact that he had he scored 31 points against Maryland. What was that against Carter Young, 31-15, which was
30 points in 2 periods.
Right. I mean, it's absurd. And the fact that he gave up 15 and he still teched the guy, people were like, "What? Was it a football score?" He had a football score in a match just a couple of weeks ago. So I'm curious to see if Stiles actually does surprise Van Ness a little bit, takes a lead like that. Can Van Ness rally against a kid like that he could see again at Big Tens? And again, he pinned him last year. I forget the exact match sequence last year, but obviously, if you pin somebody in a minute, it's either a freak accident or you end up dominating that kid. So I would love this. I can't wait to see this match this time around, especially if Ohio State is in that situation where they win the first 3 bouts of this duel. And if they can steal 149 here, then it makes things very interesting, even without Brandon Cannon. But that's my long-winded answer to say that I think Van Ness is at his best right now. Obviously, he's undefeated and he hasn't taken a couple losses, but he still leaves those little glimpses of the best. Only the best guys in the country could potentially pick him off. I honestly can't pick Stiles over Van Ness, but those little things do worry me a little bit. It's like, all right, one of these days it's going to come back to bite you, and it has the NCAA tournament. Obviously, he's rallied twice to finish 3rd, but it's just one of those things where just keep an eye on that with Van Ness.
I mean, the concern's definitely over here as well. Cannon Webster in the Big Ten tournament, just kind of those surprise ones. You have to do extra to keep Shane Van Ness down, but he has been in those situations before. I don't think it happens here against Stiles. And part of it is the previous track record. I mean, even Dylan D'Amelio from a year ago, that went down to the wire, and D'Amelio was just shot attempt after shot attempt, and that was a 4-1 where Shane Van Ness was essentially playing from behind the whole sequence, but ultimately got the differentiating takedown there. So 49 will be a lot more interesting than maybe some people will give it credit for there. 57, I hate that we have to just brush past this, but if Brandon Cannon's not going to be available, it's going to be all PJ Duke. I mean, we're talking bonus point. We're talking tech fall or pin territory against Maddox Shaw. That's just how good PJ Duke is. Hopefully Brandon Cannon's healthy in time for the Big Ten tournament and NCAA, so we get this true elite matchup between Cannon and Duke. 65, same thing. I'm gonna brush past this one just because of how good Messenbrink is in comparison to Paddy Gallagher. And Gallagher's not a pushover. It's just that Messenbrink is just so much better. And you want to talk about a weight class that's anybody's to lose. It is 65 when it comes to Mitchell Messenbrink. Okay, now we get the chance to resettle here. Top 5 matchup. Levi Haines versus Carson Kharchla. A rematch from a year ago where Kharchla, again, Haines and Kharchla aren't really that different. Okay, well, Haines, of course, is much better offensively. But when it comes to defense, when it comes to pure strength, okay, you talk about Bouzakis being one of the strongest pound-for-pound wrestlers in the country. I could make the same argument for not only Levi Haines, but Carson Kharchla as well.
Yeah, this could easily be like a 3-2, 4-2, 6-2 type match with like Haines getting a late takedown in the third period in like a 3-2, 4-2 match, and then he ends up winning, 6-2 or 7-2, and it's like, oh, wow, he kind of handled him a little bit. Like, no, I think Kharchla matches up with him really well, especially a fully healthy Carson Kharchla. Matches up well against them. Excuse me. And so when you look at what Haines has done this year, again, like almost the entire Penn State lineup, they're bonus point machines. And I think Haines is wrestling the best that he's wrestled in his career. I think now, not that he needed to get acclimated to 174, because I know he made that jump from 57 to 74. And it's tough to jump 2 weight classes, especially when you've already been an NCAA champion. And now you're facing a different crop of wrestlers in different styles, of course. But again, the guy took 3rd last year and was nearly, contending or nearly in the finals, wrestling for an NCAA title. He just lost to the eventual national champ by 2 points in Dean Hamidi from Oklahoma State. So this year, with other Penn State guys, this is his weight class to lose. Yep. And I know people like to say the popular matchup is him and Simon Ruiz, probably at the NCAA finals. Simon Ruiz from Cornell. But Kharchla, I mean, if he's already beaten Minto, I think he was behind him in the rankings last week, but he could easily beat Minto again at Big Tens. I could see him winning a rubber match against Patrick Kennedy in Big Tens as well. And then you see the Kharchla Haines matchup in the Big Ten finals, and perhaps Zach, maybe they're on the opposite side of the bracket, NCAA's, and we see Haines Kharchla. I think Kharchla at his best is an NCAA finalist, if he doesn't have to go through Levi Haines on the same side of the bracket. But in that case, yeah, this match is really close. I mean, I can't pick Kharchla over Haines in good conscience right now, but this is one of the more intriguing matches, even if Haines, in a close match, is the overwhelming favorite.
At 184, this is where, part of me wishes that Rocco Welsh was or Kharchla went up to 84, or Rocco Welsh made a cut to 174 and stayed at his original weight class here, because then you could see Kharchla was the answer that Ohio State went with, and this is why it's all personal for Rocco Welsh. So I feel bad for Dylan Fishback. I see this, and Fishback isn't nearly the same caliber of wrestler that Welsh is. I'm sure that some Ohio State fans are confident and say, well, Fishback, hey, he could give Rocco Welsh some fits. I've just seen it in real time week after week where Welsh is becoming the true number one, not an overwhelming favorite, but he's going to be the number one guy, unless he picks up a blemish here, which could be possible. He hasn't wrestled Max McAnally. Angelo Ferrari, that was 2-1 going all the way down to tiebreaker. That could easily go a different way. I'm not trying to put too much stock into that one, but Welsh is definitively the number one guy right now until proven otherwise. And when it's personal, I know that he's chomping at the bit to get this one. So I feel bad for Dylan Fishback because I think he's a great wrestler, but I don't think he's going to look as good when I don't know. I think it's this is a good emotional week for someone like Rocco Welsh.
Yeah, it's almost a shame this match wasn't at the Cael Center in Columbus. I mean, can you imagine the reception Rocco Welsh would have gotten if he had returned to Ohio State for a dual meet? I mean, you mentioned that whole story when he was at Ohio State last year before he ended up transferring. Tom Ryan wanted Carson Kharchla back in the lineup because it was thought to be potentially his final season of college wrestling. And, Kharchla was at 74. They wanted to redshirt Rocco and have him go up to 84. Then depending upon how you look at it, Rocco could have been the guy at 84 last year instead of Ryder Rogotsky, but they wanted to preserve a year of Rocco Welsh's eligibility, which from a long-term standpoint, you don't necessarily blame the coaching staff for. And again, you can hear both sides of the story. And I know Rocco's been open about it for the most part, without revealing, pretty much everything that went down in Columbus last year. But it was a whole lineup issue last year, and for some reason, Rocco Welsh was the odd man out, despite coming off a run to the NCAA finals, where he, sure enough, the only reason why he didn't win is because he ran into Carter Sirachi, albeit a hobbled Carter Sirachi, but even a hobbled Carter Sirachi is still able to win one of 5 national.
And it was 2-0. It's not like that was a tech fault
match. Yeah, despite the fact that he wasn't scoring, Rocco couldn't score on him, which is kind of mind-boggling when you really think about Rocco Welsh now. But hey, he is now settled into 184. He was really good last year, getting acclimated to that weight. Went undefeated in red shirt. Didn't like the way things were handled. That's the general consensus. And then he ends up going to Penn State, and Penn State's like, hey, we'll take you. So he goes into the best room in the country. Dylan Fishback, really, really good. I like the fact that Ohio State can kind of plug that hole with a transfer. And I know they don't really take too many transfers or guys transfer out too often, but they utilize it. It's the name of the game these days. So, but Fishback, despite being really, really good, he's wrestled way too many close matches. Welsh, to me, it's just, he's now, and again, you have to credit Penn State at this point. Could he have won a national title at Ohio State? I firmly believe so, yeah. But has he leveled up at Penn State? Yes, he has. And I think the personal connection with Ohio State, the fact that Fishback wrestles too close against some of these guys and generally has lost a couple more than he's won as of late, I just think Welsh is going to have that extra gear where he could pour this on, and I would not be surprised if this is a major decision by the time 7 minutes is up.
Josh Barr against Luke Geog. Hey, Geog's really good, but Barr in a class of his own.
I'll just say Josh Barr, I think, is what's our good buddy Justin Bash say? Next topic. I think Josh Barr's next topic right now, 197. I didn't think he was going to be this good coming off an injury or coming off the injury earlier in the year, but I mean, I would love to see him match up with Rocky Elam in the NCAA finals if that's the matchup we get. But I mean, Josh Barr is. I thought he could win a national title, Zach, but I'm just like, okay, Rocky Elam, it'd be a good match, and maybe back and forth, maybe Elam beats him. I don't think so anymore. I think I would be stunned if Josh Barr, barring an injury, Josh Barr, I think is going to roll his way into an NCAA title. He looks so darn good.
I think it's the only wrestler that could give him fits is Rocky Elam,
probably,
obviously. At heavyweight, look, Nick Feldman is going to be the favorite. We know that. It's can Cole Mirasola finally get over that proverbial metaphorical hump that he's one takedown away, he's one roll away, whatever, just a quicker escape, if you will. He's so close. And I imagine it's going to continue. And it's not because Mirasola is not getting better, he's not improving, but it's just elite wrestler after elite wrestler after elite wrestler. You would think something's going to give, but the competition actually continually gets better. So he beats Ben Keeter. Then, of course, he loses to AJ Ferrari. He loses this past week to Tay Gadali, and then Nick Feldman is just a better iteration of that. So Feldman, I would tab as a finals contender. I know Younger Bastida is going to be the guy, but Feldman would not shock me if he makes it to that point. It's a total mess at heavyweight, which I am all for, rather than it being just one guy overall for the past few seasons. But Cole, I just want to see him. Can he get closer to the? Can he get closer to Nick Feldman here? That's what I'm looking for.
Right. And I think Mirasola is better than the 10-3 decision he lost to Feldman last year in their duel. And again, I think Mirasola, with that year under his belt, is much better. But as you mentioned, can he get over the hump? And against these big guys, when you look at Tay Gadali, AJ Ferrari, he's not scoring. He's only scored 1 point each in each of those matches. Can he get a takedown? I think Feldman is he's arguably the most technically sound heavyweight amongst the upper tier. I know people might argue Younger Bastida. He's a little bit more, he's a little bit flashier, especially when it comes to wowing you with his athleticism. But I think Feldman is one of the more technically sound heavyweights I've seen in recent memory, and I think he can really make a run to the finals. I know he lost it to Gadali in sudden victory, but I mean, Feldman is just so precise in what he wants to do and how he wants to control a match. And I think that's what he's going to end up dictating against Mirasola. Now, again, if this came down to Ohio State needing Feldman to win for a 5-5 split to either tie it up for criteria or maybe get bonus, I think Feldman could chase that. I think Mirasola is too good right now for Feldman to really pour it on and chase bonus points, but it wouldn't surprise me again to see a Feldman, maybe not 10-3 like last year, but a 6-2, 7-3 type of decision where Mirasola is kind of in it, but he never really got close to really turning the page and scoring on Feldman. I would say definitely Feldman here at heavyweight.
And that's where we're going to wrap things up on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, but grateful for every minute of it because this is going to be an intense dual meet one way or another. What the end result is, I still think Penn State's going to win. They get to 85 matches in a row, and they'll continue that streak here. Ohio State's not at its strongest, and that's, it's understandable. It's unfortunate here, but we're still, some of these individual matchups, though, will be the gift that keeps on giving, a preview for what we will see, and then some at Big Tens and NCAAs. He is Nic Kosko, covers wrestling all across the board, play-by-play commentary, covers wrestling at On3. You can see links to his work down in the description. I highly encourage you to check them out. Nic, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate the perspective as always, and can't wait to have you back on the show very soon.
Appreciate you, Zach. Good conversation as always, and looking forward to this dual meet on Friday.